Welcome back, everyone. We've got something really special lined up for this deep dive.
Yeah, this is one I've been looking forward to.
We've received some incredible material from a listener about Surah Al-Ikhlas.
It's one of those texts, short but incredibly powerful.
Absolutely. It's just 4 verses, but it's like this concentrated essence of Islamic theology. We're going to unpack the core concepts and explore its significance within Islam and see how it defines Allah.
It's amazing how much depth and complexity is packed into those 4 verses.
I know, right? Get ready for some linguistic deep dives.
Oh, yeah, we're going to be getting into the nuances of the language.
And there's always a bit of debate among scholars on some of these things.
Always. It wouldn't be a proper deep dive without it.
So let's jump right in. The first verse is so simple yet so powerful. It says, say, He is Allah, the One. It just grabs your attention and puts the focus squarely on Allah.
It does. And the beauty of it is in its simplicity.
But there's a lot more to that word one than meets the eye, isn't it?
Absolutely. In Arabic, it's ahad, and it goes beyond just single or one in the numerical sense. It emphasizes Allah's absolute and indivisible unity, a unity so complete that it can't be broken down or fragmented in any way.
That's interesting.
And this is a really crucial concept in Islam because it sets Allah apart from any other conception of the divine you might encounter in other belief systems.
I'm already seeing how this challenges my own preconceived notions about God.
Yeah.
We often think of God in terms of attributes or actions.
We do. It's natural.
But this concept of ahad seems to strip away all those layers and present this pure, undifferentiated oneness.
Exactly. And the text you sent had a great analogy to illustrate this. Imagine the phrase, none of the people came.
Okay, yeah.
If you use ahad here, it means not a single person came. Not 2, not 3, nobody.
Got it.
But if you use the word wahid, which simply means one, it would imply that there could have been 2 or more people who came. Do you see how that subtle difference changes the whole meaning?
Wow, that analogy really brings it home. Ahad really emphasizes that there is no potential for multiplicity or division when it comes to Allah. It's a completely different category of oneness than anything we can imagine in the created world.
It is. It's really profound when you think about it. And to further highlight this point, there's a powerful statement from Imam Ali that says, every entity called one besides Allah is few.
Whoa.
Think about that for a second. Anything we perceive as one in our world is ultimately limited and dependent. There's always a potential for division or multiplicity. Only Allah's oneness is absolute, independent, truly one.
That's a pretty mind-blowing concept to wrap your head around. Okay, let's move on to verse 2. Allah, the eternal refuge, as-Samad. Now, I noticed the surah repeats Allah here instead of using a pronoun. What's the significance of that?
Great observation. I think the repetition of Allah emphasizes the weight and independence of each statement being made about him. It's as if each verse is a separate declaration, a pillar supporting the grand concept of his oneness. And then we encounter this very intriguing word, as-Samad.
It seems like a really key concept in understanding Surah Al-Ikhlas.
It really is.
Can you unpack some of those interpretations for us?
Certainly. As-Samad is rooted in ideas of intention, reliance, turning to someone for your needs. One interpretation is that Allah being as-Samad means He is the ultimate source of sustenance for everything in existence, the one to whom all beings turn for their needs without exception.
So it's not just about physical sustenance, but a more profound sense of reliance on Allah for everything.
Precisely. It points to a level of dependence that goes beyond our basic needs. And there are other interpretations as well. Some scholars emphasize the aspect of Allah being the self-sufficient master, needing nothing from creation while being the one everyone relies upon.
So it's about his absolute independence as well.
Exactly. And some interpretations focus on the idea that Allah as a samad has no hollow or interior. This signifies that he isn't subject to physical needs like eating or sleeping. He is complete and perfect in his essence.
That's fascinating. So we have all these different interpretations, but what's the key takeaway for someone trying to understand as-Samad? What thread connects all these interpretations?
Well, what's fascinating here is that all these interpretations, despite their nuances, point to one central idea. Allah is the ultimate self-sufficient being upon whom everything relies.
Okay.
It's a concept that can challenge us to rethink our own sources of dependence and reliance, both in the physical and spiritual realms. And, the text you provided even highlighted some supporting verses from the Quran that emphasize this idea.
Yes. It mentions Surah Al-Araf, which says, indeed to him belongs creation and command, and Surah An-Najm, which says, and to your Lord is the final destination. Both verses reinforce this idea of Allah's absolute authority and the fact that all things ultimately depend on him. I also noticed there's a definite article, the before eternal refuge, in the translation. Is that significant?
Absolutely. Using the before eternal refuge emphasizes exclusivity. It's not saying Allah is just an eternal refuge, but the eternal refuge. This highlights his unique position as the absolute and only refuge, further solidifying his distinction from anything else we might consider a source of support or security.
I'm starting to see how each word and phrase in this surah is carefully chosen to build a very specific and profound understanding of Allah. Okay, let's move on to verse 3. He neither begets nor is born. This feels like such a fundamental statement about Allah, couldn't you say?
It absolutely is. This verse goes to the very heart of safeguarding Allah's indivisible oneness and his self-sufficiency.
Okay.
We've already discussed the concept of ahad, but this verse further clarifies what that oneness entails. If he begot, it would imply some sort of fragmentation or derivation from his essence, which contradicts ahad.
Right, because if he begets, then he's no longer the absolute indivisible one. It implies a separation, a coming from something else.
Precisely. And the second part of the verse, nor is born, further reinforces his self-sufficiency. If he was born, it would imply dependence on something else, which contradicts the concept of as-samad, the ultimate source.
I see.
It would suggest a need for a creator or a cause outside of himself.
And that would create a whole chain of dependence, wouldn't it? If Allah was born, then who or what gave birth to him? It just keeps going back and ultimately undermines the core principle of his absolute oneness and independence.
You've hit the nail on the head. These negations in verse 3 are crucial for establishing Allah's unique nature. They reinforce his absolute transcendence beyond any limitations or dependencies we can imagine.
It's incredible how these verses build on each other, creating a more complete picture of Allah's oneness with every statement. Now we come to the final verse, verse 4. Nor is there to him any equivalent. Talk about a powerful statement.
It really is.
It feels like the ultimate mic drop moment.
It does. This verse acts as a seal, firmly rejecting any possibility of a peer or equal to Allah, whether in essence, attributes, or actions. This further reinforces the concept of ahad and connects back to as-samad.
So it's bringing all those previous concepts together to emphasize Allah's absolute uniqueness and independence.
Precisely. By stating that there's nothing equivalent to him, the surah is rejecting any attempt to compare Allah to anything within creation or to limit him by human conceptions. It's a powerful affirmation of his absolute transcendence.
This is blowing my mind. We've gone through these 4 incredibly powerful verses, and I'm seeing how each one builds upon the previous one, creating this comprehensive framework for understanding Allah's oneness. But I'm curious, how did these verses come together to paint a complete picture? How do they fit into the larger context of Islamic theology?
That's a great question, and I think that's where we can dive into some of the fascinating stories and interpretations that have arisen around Surah Al-Ikhlas. It's not just about understanding the words themselves, but also how they've been understood and applied throughout Islamic history.
I'm definitely ready for some stories. I feel like stories can really bring these abstract concepts to life and help us grasp their deeper meaning.
Absolutely. And this surah has some truly captivating stories associated with it. Shall we explore those in the next part of our deep dive?
Let's do it.
One of the most captivating stories surrounding Surah Al-Ikhlas is the story of its revelation. It really highlights the surah's significance in understanding the Islamic concept of God.
Oh, you mean the story about how a group of Jewish people approached the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and asked him to describe Allah?
That's the one. These individuals were seeking a clear understanding of who this God was that the Prophet Muhammad was preaching about, and instead of immediately answering, the Prophet waited for 3 days.
3 days. This is a pretty long pause. I wonder what was going through his mind during those 3 days.
It's intriguing to think about, isn't it? There are different accounts of who exactly asked the question and what their intentions were, but the core message remains the same. After those 3 days of waiting, Surah Al-Ikhlas was revealed, a direct response to a deep inquiry about the nature of Allah.
Wow, it's incredible to think about that context, this incredibly profound and concise surah coming as a direct revelation in response to a genuine question about the nature of God.
It is, and within those 4 short verses, you have a complete and powerful picture of Allah's oneness, his indivisibility, his self-sufficiency, his absolute uniqueness. It's like the essence of Islamic monotheism distilled into these powerful words.
You know, that story really resonates with me because I think we all, at some point in our lives, grapple with this question of who or what God is.
Right. It's a universal human question.
And I can imagine how powerful it must have been for those people to hear these verses for the first time, to receive such a clear and direct answer to this deep-seated question.
I agree. It speaks to the power of revelation and the way it can cut through confusion and provide clarity in our search for understanding.
And speaking of understanding, we talked earlier about the various interpretations of as-Samad, that incredibly profound term used to describe Allah in the second verse. It's a term that has sparked a lot of discussion and debate among scholars throughout Islamic history. Can we dive into some of those interpretations a bit more?
Absolutely. You know what I find fascinating is how all these different interpretations, despite their nuances, circle back to the same central idea. Allah as the ultimate and only refuge, the one upon whom everything depends. We touched upon this earlier, but some scholars interpret as-Samad as Allah being the self-sufficient master, the one who is sought for all needs, but who himself needs nothing. Others focus on the aspect of him having no hollow or interior,
Right.
signifying that he isn't subject to physical needs like eating or sleeping, highlighting his complete and perfect essence.
And there's also the interpretation of as-Samad as the eternal being, the one who has always existed and will always exist, transcending the limitations of our understanding of time and space.
Yes.
That one really blows my mind.
It's a powerful concept, isn't it? And one that highlights Allah's absolute and timeless nature, his existence beyond the confines of our limited perception of reality.
Yeah. I know we've talked about several interpretations, but personally, I'm drawn to the one that describes as-Samad as the one who brings things into existence by simply commanding be.
Right.
It just ties in so beautifully with the Islamic belief in Allah as the creator of everything. It paints this incredible picture of effortless power where Allah simply wills something into being. And it is.
It's a beautiful and compelling interpretation, and one that resonates with a lot of people. It speaks to the awe-inspiring power of Allah's creative force.
Okay, so we've talked about the fascinating story surrounding Surah Al-Ikhlas, explored some of the different interpretations of its key concepts, but there's one more thing I want to discuss, and it's a big one. The claim that Surah Al-Ikhlas is equal to 1/3 of the entire Quran in value. That's a pretty weighty statement. What's the reasoning behind that?
It's a claim that might seem surprising at first, considering the surah's brevity, but it all comes down to its core message, the absolute oneness of Allah, a concept known as Tawheed in Arabic. This concept is the very foundation of Islam, one of the 3 fundamental principles of the faith.
So for those who might not be familiar with Islam, can you quickly explain what the other 2 fundamental principles are?
Of course. Alongside Tawheed, the belief in the oneness of God, the other 2 fundamental principles of Islam are belief in prophethood and the belief in the Day of Judgment.
So essentially, by perfectly encapsulating the fundamental principle of Tawheed, Surah Al-Ikhlas is seen as embodying 1/3 of the core tenets of the Islamic faith, hence its immense value.
Exactly. It's not just a random statement, but a recognition of this surah's profound importance within the Islamic framework. It's a concise yet incredibly powerful expression of the very heart of Islam.
This whole discussion has been so enlightening. We've explored the meaning of each verse, delved into the captivating stories surrounding Surah Al-Ikhlas, and even unpacked its immense significance within the broader context of Islam. I'm so glad we took this deep dive together.
Me too. It's been a fascinating journey. But before we wrap up completely, I think there are a few more thought-provoking questions we can leave our listener with, questions that can perhaps spark further exploration and contemplation.
I love that idea. Let's move on to our final thoughts and leave our listener with something to ponder as we conclude our deep dive into Surah Al-Ikhlas. It's incredible how much we've unpacked from just these 4 verses.
I know, right? It's a testament to the depth and richness of this surah.
So to recap, we've really delved into the heart of Allah's oneness through Surah Al-Ikhlas.
We have.
We've seen how it uses powerful negations, defining him by what he is not, to guide us toward this truly transcendent understanding of God.
It's such a unique approach, isn't it?
Yeah.
To define by negation.
Yeah, and we've explored its central role within Islam, how it's considered equal to 1/3 of the entire Quran in value
It's amazing.
because of its concise but perfect encapsulation of Tawheed, the belief in the oneness of God.
Absolutely.
It's amazing how much impact this short chapter has had and continues to have.
It really does speak to the power of language
Yeah.
and the way it can convey such a profound truths in a concise way. And it leaves us with some thought-provoking questions.
Definitely.
If Surah Al-Ikhlas so definitively rejects any form of equivalence to Allah, What does that mean for our understanding of divine attributes and actions in other faiths?
That's a huge question.
It is.
It makes me think about how different religions grapple with the concept of God and the divine, and how those conceptions might align with or diverge from this idea of absolute oneness
Right.
presented in Surah Al-Ikhlas.
Oh, it invokes us to think critically about how we define and understand the divine, and how those definitions shape our beliefs and practices.
And on a more personal level, I think it's worth reflecting on how the concept of As-Samad, Allah as the eternal refuge, resonates with us individually. What does it mean for you to have a source of ultimate reliance and support?
Yeah.
Does it challenge your current understanding of where you place your trust and dependence?
That's a powerful question to sit with.
It is. It brings these abstract theological concepts down to a level of personal meaning and introspection.
It
It
does.
challenges us to examine our own lives and identify the things we turn to for support, comfort, and security.
I think that's a perfect note to leave our listeners on.
I agree. Well, I think we've successfully navigated the depths of Surah Al-Ikhlas today. It's been a truly enriching journey for me, and I hope you, our listener, have also gained a deeper understanding and appreciation for the profound wisdom contained within these four powerful verses.
I think so too. And remember, this is just the beginning.
Always more to learn.
There's always more to explore, more to learn, and more to contemplate when it comes to understanding the divine. So keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
Absolutely. Until next time.